Welcome to Mind and Metaphor, the podcast where we explore the powerful ideas shaping our mental and emotional worlds. I'm your host, Alex.
And I'm your host, Ben. Today, we are taking a very deep dive into a work that is, on the surface, beautifully simple.
Right.
But when you look closer psychologically, it's a fascinating minefield.
We're talking about the book WABI-SABI Within by Rolek Taub-Pfeff. It's structured as a 30-day guided journal. And its goal is to translate the ancient Japanese philosophy of finding beauty in imperfection into, well, a practical tool for modern life.
The structure itself is quite prescriptive.
Okay.
Each day, the author presents you with a personal image, maybe a flower, a family photo, a weathered landscape, followed by a short, reflective poem.
Okay.
And then, and this is key, a mandatory writing assignment.
Mandatory, so you can't just passively read it.
No, the book explicitly tells you not to move on until you've completed the reflection.
Wow.
The core mechanism is getting you to actively reframe your perspective. You're constantly prompted to look at something worn, incomplete, or what you might call broken, and to find the beauty, the unique story, the perfection within its imperfection.
And the clear implication is then to apply that same compassionate lens to your own life,
Yeah.
to your own history, to your own perceived flaws.
But Alex, this is where it gets complicated. Right in the preface, the book makes a claim that is both its biggest potential strength and,
Okay.
from a clinical standpoint, its most serious vulnerability.
Okay.
The author states, and I'm quoting directly, "Ultimately, wabi-sabi will be whatever you wish it to be."
And that single sentence is the very heart of our entire discussion today.
Right.
It is the exact point where the profound potential for personal healing and the very real risk of clinical harm collide.
Precisely.
So let's unpack this with our expert perspectives. Let's start with the most supportive view.
Okay.
If we were to channel an expert in acceptance and commitment therapy, let's call her Dr. Sarah Chen. What would she make of this book?
Oh, Dr. Chen would likely be quite optimistic, even excited by this.
Yeah? She would see that whatever you wish it to be line, not as a weakness, but as the book's central therapeutic function.
Interesting.
She'd argue this isn't some vague philosophical text, but a practical, hands-on workbook for developing what ACT calls psychological flexibility.
And for our listeners, what exactly is psychological flexibility?
Let's translate that. It's the ability to hold your thoughts and feelings a little more lightly, to unhook or diffuse from that rigid, tyrannical inner critic. And, most importantly, to take committed action toward your values, even in the presence of discomfort or imperfection.
Right.
So for Dr. Chen, this book's daily exercises are a form of mental training.
Okay.
When it asks you to find beauty in a crooked branch, it's training your mind to find acceptance for your own crooked, nonlinear journey through life.
So it's about ending the struggle with reality.
Yes.
And this supportive view would be powerfully reinforced by a researcher like Dr. Lisa Thompson, who specializes in self-compassion.
Absolutely. Dr. Thompson would point to the robust data from her field, a lot of it pioneered by Kristen Neff, that directly debunks the common myth that being kind to yourself just leads to, complacency or laziness.
That's a myth so many people still believe. So what does the evidence actually show?
The evidence is overwhelming. Self-compassion is a performance enhancer.
Wow.
When you stop dedicating all that cognitive and emotional energy to harsh self-criticism, you free up those resources for actual problem solving, for creativity, for resilience after failure.
Right.
So Dr. Thompson would argue this book provides a direct, practical pathway to that state.
Okay.
Accepting your cracks isn't about giving up. It's about finally gaining the courage to start mending them because you're no longer paralyzed by the fear of the mending process itself being imperfect.
Okay. So that's a very strong, evidence-backed supportive case. The book is a tool for developing psychological flexibility and a gateway to self-compassion.
Right.
But this is where the clinical critique comes in. And it's a very serious one.
Uh-huh.
Let's bring in Dr. Michael Rodriguez, a clinical psychologist specializing in treating severe perfectionism with cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
What would be his primary concern?
He would use two words: clinically irresponsible.
Oof.
He would argue that this whole approach is a potential gateway to what's known as therapeutic bypass. For his patients, and we're talking about people whose lives are being actively and severely damaged by their disorders, a philosophy like this can be genuinely dangerous.
Could you walk us through a concrete example of what that bypass would look like?
Certainly. Let's use an analogy. It's like putting a beautiful acceptance sticker on your car's check engine light instead of actually looking under the hood.
Right.
A client whose perfectionism is so severe that they are unable to complete projects at work could use this book's philosophy to say, my inability to finish this report isn't a symptom of my crippling fear of failure. It's just my WABI-SABI process of letting things be incomplete.
Right, or someone with debilitating social anxiety relabeling their avoidance of human connection as embracing my imperfect, solitary nature.
Exactly.
It becomes a sophisticated, beautiful-sounding justification for not doing the hard, systematic work that evidence-based CBT demands.
Exactly. The work of identifying specific cognitive distortions like all or nothing thinking and actively challenging them through real-world behavioral experiments.
Yeah.
You can't simply reframe your way out of a clinical disorder.
Right.
And this critique would be cemented by a research methodologist, someone like a Dr. Rebecca Martinez.
And her perspective would be purely about the evidence.
Correct. Dr. Martinez would cut through the philosophy and ask a single stark question.
Yeah.
Where is the data? We have literally decades of research and hundreds of randomized controlled trials demonstrating the efficacy of CBT.
Right.
For the WABI-SABI method, we have a heartfelt self-published workbook. She would argue that from an ethical standpoint, promoting an unproven method that could divert people from treatments we know work is highly questionable.
So this sets up the fundamental conflict of our discussion. It's the soul of therapy versus the science of therapy.
Right.
But Ben, there's a critical piece of data that complicates the pure science argument, a known issue that even a CBT purist like Dr. Rodriguez would have to concede.
And that would be the pattern recreation problem.
Exactly. Can you explain what that is?
It's a well-documented and often frustrating clinical reality. Even when CBT is successful in the short term, let's say you successfully treat a client's perfectionism at work, it's so common to see that same underlying perfectionistic pattern reemerge 6 months or a year later, but in a new domain. So the specific symptom, the thought-action chain, is broken.
Right.
But the underlying worldview, the core belief that says my fundamental worth is conditional on my flawless performance, that remains totally intact.
And this is the exact opening where the soul argument comes roaring back into the conversation.
Okay.
It's where a narrative therapist, let's call him Dr. David Kim, would step in.
Right.
He would argue the reason the pattern returns is because you've only changed the tactics. You haven't changed the story.
What does he mean by that?
Dr. Kim would view WABI-SABI Within as a masterclass in helping people do something very specific to, as in, externalize their problems. This is a core concept in narrative therapy.
Okay.
It's about training yourself to stop thinking, I am a failure, and instead learn to think, there is the story of perfectionism trying to convince me I'm worthless again.
I see. So the book provides a powerful alternative story, a WABI-SABI narrative, in which a life with flaws, setbacks, and scars is not just acceptable, but is in fact a sign of depth, beauty, and a life fully lived.
Precisely. And Dr. Kim would argue that this new, deeply internalized story is what can protect you or inoculate you against that pattern recreation in the future.
Precisely. And Dr. Kim would argue that this new, deeply internalized story is what can protect you, or inoculate you, against that pattern recreation in the future. But this brings us to what might be the most nuanced and important critique of all, from a cultural psychologist, a Dr. Yuki Tanaka.
And her focus would be laser sharp on that central claim,
Yes.
that wabi-sabi can be whatever you wish it to be.
Yes. She would identify this as a textbook case of the therapeutic dilution paradox
Wow.
and would raise serious concerns about cultural appropriation.
Okay.
She would argue that authentic wabi-sabi is not an infinitely flexible choose-your-own-adventure concept.
Right.
It's a worldview deeply rooted in specific, profound cultural and spiritual traditions, in Zen Buddhism, in the Japanese aesthetic of mono no aware, which is a kind of gentle, poignant sadness for the transience of all things.
So the concept has history, rules, constraints.
Exactly.
And it's those very constraints that give it its depth and power.
Exactly. Dr. Tanaka would argue that by saying it's whatever you want it to be, we are hollowing it out. We're taking the beautiful, exotic shell and leaving the soul behind, all to create an easy-to-digest, marketable self-help product.
Yeah.
It's the psychological equivalent of getting a tattoo of a kanji character without knowing what it truly means.
Wow.
It's all surface, no depth.
That is a devastatingly powerful point. So, after exploring all these expert perspectives, where does that leave us?
Right.
It feels like the most effective and maybe the most ethical path forward isn't choosing one of these extremes.
It has to be a synthesis.
Okay.
It's what Dr. Chen might describe as a culturally informed, evidence-based practice.
Mm-hmm.
It means we must take these ancient meaning-rich philosophies and approach them with two things at the same time: a deep reverence for their cultural context and history, and the scientific rigor to test them and ensure they're actually helping people without causing unintentional harm.
In other words, you need the technique, the science of CBT, to teach people how to challenge their thoughts and change their behaviors.
Right.
But you may also need the philosophy, the soul of wabi-sabi, to teach them why a life of imperfection is valuable and worth living.
Yes.
Let me use another analogy.
Okay.
It's the difference between learning a few useful phrases in a foreign language and truly understanding the culture that language came from.
Right.
The one helps you get by, the other allows you to truly connect.
So our final verdict on Wabi-Sabi Within is that while it is certainly not a clinical manual and could be risky if used as a replacement for professional therapy,
Mm-hmm.
it serves a crucial purpose.
Okay.
It forces us to ask a vital question of our modern scientific therapeutic approaches.
And that question is?
Do they have a soul? Do they provide our clients not just with a set of coping mechanisms, but with a deeper, more resilient, and more beautiful story to live by?
Wow.
This book is a reminder that healing isn't always about adding something new or becoming perfect. Sometimes it's about learning to see the profound beauty and strength in what is already there, cracks and all.
Now, here's a question we'd like you to think about. Look around the room you're in right now and find an object that is old, worn, or in some way imperfect. Take a moment to really look at it.
Yeah.
What story does its wabi-sabi tell you? And how might that story apply to a part of your own life, your own journey, that you've been judging too harshly?